MovieWeb.com.
So to begin with, Michael, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, when did you first sort of have the idea to take, essentially your life and both of your lives and make a documentary out of Troll 2 and tell me a little bit of the genesis of the project.
Wow. To give you a little bit of backstory, as a 10-and-a-half-year-old, I played the child star in Troll 2, and really that was my first audition, first movie, and really thought that I was making a great horror film, and it was something completely different. As we were making the movie, and I think that's what makes Troll 2 kind of so special in my opinion, is that really everybody was trying to make this great movie, and we failed miserably. But after finishing the film, as this 10-year-old, I thought, okay, we're done with the movie. A few months from now, we'll go to the local Cineplex and we'll watch it for the first time. And that's what I imagined in my mind's eye, and that didn't happen. And it wasn't until that following Christmas, I guess a year and a half later, I was unwrapping presents, and one of the last presents I unwrapped was this VHS tape. And you have to understand that when we made the movie, it was called Goblin, and so here I was, this 10-year-old, looking at this strange VHS, and it said Troll 2, and then just being kind of puzzled, and my mother saying, "Michael, it's your movie, let's put it in." And I thought, oh my gosh, and I turn it over, and there's my face on the back screaming, and we pull out the VHS and stick it in the VHS player, and it was, not more than 15 seconds into it, my dad just put his head in his hands and said, "Oh, Michael, this is a terrible movie." And I remember just looking at the TV and just being like, oh my gosh, this, I was still young, but I was old enough to realize this is a bad movie. And being embarrassed by it, and kind of really at that point running from it, not wanting anything to do with it. But it continued, after VHS, it was on Showtime and HBO and Cinemax all the time. And it just continually aired. And even as I grew up as a teenager, I remember, I had the one uncle who would call me every time it was on TV and say, "Oh, Michael, your crappy movie is on again." And just never went away. The film never went away. Even though I continued to audition and act in other roles that I thought were more notable and kind of more meaningful, Troll 2 just was still coming up in my life in weird ways. So that, up until 5 years ago, I really distanced myself from Troll 2. It was kind of that, the troll in the closet. It was that, that almost didn't even feel like I even did it. I kind of denied association with the film. And 5 years ago, I moved back to, I guess it was just over 4 years ago, moved back to Los Angeles here with my wife to pursue a career in the industry as a filmmaker, and I was writing a script at the time, and I was actually continuing to meet with casting directors and was doing what everybody else here in LA seems to do. And out of nowhere, this was 2006, I started getting these messages on MySpace, which really dates this project. You know that you've been working on a project a long time when technology booms and then completely vanishes. But I started getting messages from kids on MySpace that said, "Are you the Michael Stephenson from Troll 2? Did you play Joshua Waits in Troll 2?" And at first, I'd look at these messages and just think, just kind of, oh my gosh, this thing is never going to go away. And all of a sudden, I started getting pictures. And these pictures would have 7 or 8 kids in a basement, crowded around a television, championing Troll 2, watching it, dressing up as goblins, eating green food. And what was interesting is I got these pictures from kids all throughout different parts of the country. Nobody knew about each other. They all thought they were doing the same thing. And I remember just being overtaken with the curiosity and really wanting to understand why. And also thinking about how all of this was happening on its own, organically, over time. This wasn't some studio or somebody trying, this movie was finding its audience all on its own, just through word of mouth, just through somebody saying, having the VHS tape. You got to see this horrible movie. Watch it now.
George, what was your first reaction when you first started to hear about the phenomena that was happening and started to notice this on your own?
Well, yeah. Well, Pat, go back to the time like when Michael first saw it, when he was 10 years old. I was practicing dentistry and moved back to Alabama. It was I think the first time I ever saw it was made in 1989, and I saw Troll 2 for the first time about 91 or 92, and it was in VHS copy. And my sister called me. Well, first of all, my patients were coming into my practice, and they would say, "Dr. Hardy, you're in a movie. I just saw you in a movie. You was on HBO the other night, and they're renting it over at the rental center here in town, one Blockbusters or whatever it was called back then, you know." And I went, "Oh gosh!" And so then, because I just thought, "Oh God, what's this thing going to be like? What's it going to be like?" That was my first feeling. Because I always remember asking Rosella and Claudio through the interpreter, because remember it was made by an all-Italian crew that didn't speak English. You know, is it ever going to come out on, you know, the big screen here in the States? Well, it might in Europe, but I doubt it will in the States. It'll probably go straight to VHS. Well, it did. It went straight to the VHS. My sister called me from Philadelphia. She says, "George, your movie's out." And I go, yeah, along with my patients telling me. I said, "Well, what's it like? What's it like? What's the feedback on it?" She says, "Well, it's bad." And I said, "Well, how bad is bad?" She says, "It's really bad. I'm telling you, it's really bad." "Well, how bad is really bad?" Well, she says, "It's really, really bad." And I just thought, "Oh gosh, I dread this." And I remember putting that VHS copy in the TV, and I saw the first 5 minutes, and I just remember, I just couldn't. The scene with me and Margot on the couch, just kissing or whatever. I just thought, "Oh, I can't watch it."
So, are you devastated? Are your dreams as an actor sort of out the window when you start seeing this,
or?
or?
I didn't really dream of being an actor as much because I'm immersed in dentistry. I'm a general dentist, and I did it on a whim. So, I always thought, well, it was fun making Troll 2. I really enjoyed that, but I didn't have, just because out of practicality, I'm practicing dentistry. That's my income, And I've gone to school for that. Although I really always wanted to act. I'm not telling you I didn't want to do that. It's just the fact that, if you're not in Los Angeles or New York, forget it. Well, anyway, bottom line is I just put it in and I can't watch this thing anymore. So I was just pawning off on my patients. And I'd let my patients watch it on virtual eyeglasses, I'd show it to them. Even my 4-year-old at the time or whatever, I'd make her watch it, scare her to death.
Well, so what was your reaction when Michael, I assume, Michael, you contacted George and said, "Hey, we're going to do this documentary"?
Fast forward 17 years later, 2006 of April was kind of a point where things just kind of went to, on the internet. I mean, things were happening. Michael started getting messages on MySpace, and people were sending him pictures from all over the world about Troll 2 parties, and at the same time, I'm getting messages from fans and people doing radio shows on Troll 2, and I get phone calls. And so it just so happens that I stumbled across an IMDb, which I had no idea what that even meant. You guys out in Los Angeles, y'all don't know what that means. So I go to IMDb, Internet Movie Database, and at the bottom of the message board, there's an invite by a fan for a Troll 2 cast reunion in Provo. I put all my money down on a flight, $700, $800. The next day I flew out from Atlanta to Salt Lake, and I went to the screening. And my intent was to see Michael. He was 10 years old last time, and I wanted to meet him. But anyway, I got there late, and the lights were already down for the film. And when they came on, I literally got tackled by all these BYU students wanting my autograph, and I thought, this is weird. This is really. But Michael wasn't there that night. But we were just talking about this. I met Michael a few weeks later, and I just flew out here to Michael because he said, "George, this is happening to me too. Let's, you feel I'm on in about."
And then talking. We talked on the phone. I just said, "I'm making a documentary. Let's have fun with this."
Yeah, let's do that.
George also had similar stories of fans contacting him, and then we met for the first time after all those years. A couple weeks later, and then it was the New York City screening months later that actually I didn't know really at that point. you know, when I was making the documentary, it was one of these things where I didn't want it to be one of these documentaries where you see the filmmaker all the time, or it's hosted, or it's like, you know, come with me to the worst movie. You know, I wanted to tell this story with the characters, and I didn't know who that was going to be until New York City. And that was a really important screening.
And that's when you realized I can make George the focus and sort of have him be the introduction to the film and this world.
I actually stepped out of a taxi with him as we went to the theater, and there's this line wrapped around the block, and we didn't think it was for Troll 2. And we get out, and all of a sudden the line erupted, and they recognized this guy, and they're like, Farmer Waits, you know, George Hardy.
Yeah, it's like,
and I'll never forget the look on his face, because I looked at his face brightened up, and he just looked at me, and he's like, oh, Michael, come on, this is great, and just runs over and is signing autographs, and that's where I really was like, this is yesterday. I mean, he was in Alabama giving root canals, and now he's here.
Signing autographs in New York.
Well, and you certainly took right to it. I mean, you can tell the fun that you were having and that, yeah.
Why not? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking, this is great for somebody to get a thrill out of meeting a blast from the past. You know, I'll represent that for any, you know, just, I mean, it's great.
Well, I want to ask you guys about some specifics in the film before we run out of too much time.
Sure.
Margot Prey. You can sort of tell the uncomfortableness that both of you have when you're there at her house. Clearly, there's something going on
Right.
Beyond everything sort of emotional with her. Just the fact that she thinks this was a good movie and that, you know, equates it to Casablanca. So I was just curious about your sort of take. And, you know, obviously you knew her when you were a little kid. You knew her, worked with her as a peer. So what were the emotions and feelings that you were feeling when you were, you know, with her?
It was interesting because we showed up there really not knowing what to expect. And when we saw the sign, it was one of these things like, well, we're never going to get let in. When she opened the door and I saw her for the first time, I mean, you can see it in the film, it felt like I had fallen into like a frozen lake. Like I couldn't talk, which is like, oh. And there was, you know, she invited us in, and I explained the documentary and what we're doing, and she lit up. It was actually kind of a bright spot in her year to see us and to talk about the film, and was really like, I would love to, and so we came back and we talked with her, and it was interesting for me because there was it was sad, it was a heavy feeling, but at the same time, she doesn't want you to pity her. Her life, how it is working for her, and I actually found her really quite not only likable, but really admirable. I mean, she's taking care of her mom, you know, and so there's some complexity to that situation because her view of the movie obviously is different, but it's not that much further than Claudio's view of the movie. And
which is actually the next thing I wanted to ask about, because he clearly at the convention towards the end of the film gets upset. I mean, he's heckling the panel, he's heckling the other actors, and he seems to be offended by the fact that it now is sort of the film. I mean, happy at first that the film is getting this sort of recognition, but then sort of what is your feeling about sort of where Claudio sits on it?
Well, I think, you know, he gets upset, and obviously you see him process what, you know, he calls all the actors actor dogs, and you see him process that how this film is really enjoyed, and that may be different than what he thought or what his expectation was. But all in all, I mean, after he gets upset, I think he says one of the most poignant things in the film, and he says, you know, whether a movie makes you laugh or whether it makes you cry or whether, the most important thing is that a movie moves you. And every time I watch the end of the film and I see the Troll 2 up on the big screen and Claudio and Grandpa Seth sitting next together, laughing and having a good time, it gets me, because it's like, really, that's what a movie is for. It's to move you. It's to make you feel something. And whether Troll 2 has made people feel what Claudio intended, it's kind of beside the point.
Right. Also, quickly, I wanted to ask about Don Packard, because I found it so sort of telling, you know, what he talks about. And you know, he says that he wanted to kill this little boy in the movie. I mean, when he said that to you, knowing you were that little boy, I mean, how did you feel?
Well, you know, when we were filming the movie, I remember being terrified by him. Really, just, he was at his movie presence. So then to show up all these years later and learn that he actually wanted to kill me, it was interesting because as a filmmaker, you gotta understand that I almost disassociated myself with the 10-year-old kid. You know, as a filmmaker, it's like, where did this guy come from? Like, I would have had no idea. He was in a mental hospital, you know, and so it was really exciting. But at the same time, it was just, I was 7 feet away from him on one camera when he said it. So
Yeah, and the last thing I needed to ask, Troll 2 Part 2. Claudio talks about that in the film. I mean, is that just something you think Claudio just sort of said because?
Claudio, as you probably saw in the movie, he's serious in everything he does, and he actually talked to me today, as a matter of fact, about him and Rosella finishing the script and wanting to get it made.
George, is that something that you would be open
sure,
to?
why not?
You would do that?
Of course I would.
I was in a film called Troll 2.
Okay.